All right, so we're going to do example 2 for the law of cosine. So we are given that angle A is 63 degrees, little side B is 15, and little side Z is 12. We are asked to solve triangle ABC. So again, whether you choose to draw a crappy version of this triangle or not is entirely up to you. If you want, you can just list the 6 things that you need to know, right? So you know big A is 63 degrees. You do not know big B. You do not know big C. You do not know little a. And the reason that first bit is important is because this means you cannot do the law of sines as this problem is currently written, which is why it's a law of cosines problem, right? To do the law of sines, you need to have a pair, and the only angle you know is A, and you don't know side A, so you can't do the law of cosines here. The law of sines here. So that's why we're going to do law of cosines. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find little a, right? I'm going to find little a using the fact that based on the law of cosines, a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine of a. And I'm going to just type that into my calculator and square root it to find a. So in my calculator, I'm going to type in the square root of b squared, which is 15 squared, plus c squared, which is 12 squared, minus a 2 times a 15 times a 12 cosine of 62. Oh, sorry, 63, my bad. 63. And I square rooted it. So I end up getting that A is approximately a 14.337, which I'm going to store as alpha A because I know I might need it. So I'm going to hit store as A. So 14.337, right? Okay, cool. So now that I have a pair, I have a couple options. Now that I have a pair, probably the easiest choice is to just go ahead and use the law of sines. So I can use this pair. Make sure you use the stored version of lowercase a, right, to find b, and if I use this pair to find big B, I then either can do the law of sines again to find big C, or I can use the fact that the 3 angles sum to 180 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and target big B. So I know that sine of big B over 15 should be sine of 63 degrees over the thing that I just called A, right? Big capital A that I stored in my calculator. Now, technically, it's lowercase a. If we want to use that notation, you can call it lowercase a, but I know that it's stored in my calculator as big capital A. So if I want to solve for b, I'm going to multiply the 15 over and then take the inverse sine. So b is going to be the inverse sine of 15 sine of 63 divided by the thing I stored in my calculator as capital A. So I type in second sine for the inverse sine, 15 sine of 63, close the sine parentheses, divided by alpha A, right? So that's what I'm going to type in my calculator, and I'm going to hit enter, and that's going to give me my B, which is a 68.777, approximately, right? So I put a little squiggle because it's approximate. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit store and store that as B, right? So my B is approximately a 68.777. It is not repeating for the record. So I'm going to store that as B. And then, honestly, I can either do the law of sines again, and if you wanted, it's easy enough. The only difference is that instead of being a 15, this would be a 12. So if you want, the easiest way to do this is actually not to bother to use B, but rather to do this exact setup again, except instead of keeping it this way, change this 15 into a 12, and that would then be a C. So C should be the inverse sine of a 12 sine of 63 all over an A. And again, the advantage to doing that is you can just hit second enter and call up what you had and then change the 15 to a 12 and hit enter, and there's your C. The other way to get C, so 48.22, either 2 or 3, depending on if you round or truncate, and then make that approximate. The other way to get C is to do to sum these values and subtract from 180. Either of those would be fine. It is always worth doing the quick double check that your largest angle is opposite your largest side. The largest side is a 15, and sure enough, 68 something is my largest angle. The middle side is the 14 point stuff, and sure enough, the 63 is the middle of the 3 angles, and the smallest side is the 12, and the 48 is the smallest angle.